Hi! As another year sets in, it is time for me to make another CK-free wishlist video. One might think as the game continues to grow, my appetite for new things would be satiated, but alas, my list has only grown. For those who aren't familiar with these videos, I like to put together a small series of small features, fixes and tidbits that I'd like to see added in the next year of the game. To be clear, this is not a request log for mainline features that you might find on the floor plan, like Merchant Republics or map expansions. These are much smaller things that I believe would be possible to add to any update or DLC, regardless of theme. Surprisingly, a lot of features we've talked about have actually found themselves being implemented in one form or another, so maybe such fortune may repeat itself here. And so this year I have 15 suggestions, broken down into 3 sections. 5 major, but not that major, that will make changes to the actual gameplay, 5 minor, that will alter and add some very sideline ideas, and 5 petty, that are so small they include hotkeys and bug fix requests. Right, with that all being said, shall we begin? First up, historic de jures, or de jure. The way in which de jure works can be difficult at times. If the Kingdom of France controls the entire Duchy of Brittany, for example, after 100 years, the Kingdom of Brittany will lose its only de jure duchy and simply vanish from the world. So later, if you want to play as the Kingdom of Brittany, well, you cannot. This vanishing of titles and borders was intensified after Legends of the Dead added legitimizing legends that allow you to bypass the 100-year time limit and instantly integrate an entire kingdom into your primary title's kingdom. So for example, after one legend, the Kingdom of Wales can be eaten by the Kingdom of England and just vanish. There's no way to bring it back. As such, my first request would be a new type of de jure called historic de jures. Even if a duchy or kingdom drifts into another title, the original claim is retained as a new historic claim. In its historic state, it would serve no active purpose than to just log the previous higher titleage, but for a hefty amount of prestige, gold or whatever resource, you can restore the original de jure to as it was prior to the drift. With that, the now reverted de jure also could become a historic de jure, meaning these states can effectively become contested territory between 2 titles. I'm thinking of how contention works with things like the Danelaw and England, having need for a way for 2 separate titles to have access to de jure over the same land without needing an unclear decision. This would also allow players to not feel locked out from making historic borders just because a conqueror decided to turn half the map into their colouring book. Having a way to resurrect titles that have been lost to time is perhaps my most wanted minor feature in the next chapter, and so it takes pride of place at number 1. Village holdings. Alright, here's a biggie, so bear with me. As it stands right now, I think there is an issue with the representation of holdings and their size that affects both snowballing progression and historical accuracy. There are currently 3 feudal holdings to choose from: castles, cities and temples. Regardless of where you are or local development, every holding can be upgraded instantly with buildings to create an economic and military hub. Additionally, when you convert from being tribal to feudal, all your tribal holdings instantly convert over to great castles, as if an unholy vat of money appeared to fund such a conversion. Where did all these people and money come from? My full suggestion involves breaking up holdings, with castles and cities and temples being the administration of a holding, while a village being a reflection of the populace of a holding. In practice, it could look something like this. When building a new holding on empty land, you would now have access to build a castle, a village, or a temple. What would be different here is that building a castle or a temple does not give you access to the traditional economic buildings such as farms and fields or cattle pastures. Alternatively, you could build a village, which would give you access to the farms and economic potential with all of its peasantry, but no access to military buildings like forts, walls and outposts. After this, you can then choose to upgrade to a further tier of holding again, turning perhaps a castle into a castle with a village, a temple into a temple with a village, or a village into either a castle village, a temple village, or a full-blown city, giving access to both military and economic buildings as it works currently in standard play. By adding in this middle step of holding progression, I see a way to better reflect a transition from tribal to feudal, with tribal camps just becoming villages instead of castles outright, and then needing to themselves to fund an additional step. Also, it means that building a temple can now reflect just funding an isolated monastic community dwelling without assuming the population of Tahiti will be setting up shop just outside. I really do think that adding some form of middle step or holding progression or division of population and holding administration could hold some big potential and work around some of the snowballing, growth and accuracy of the game. More Peacedeal options. In Wards and Wardens, the introduction of hostage taking and offering was added to expand upon Peacedeal options. While raising an enemy's heir in my image to foster their succession to my own is an interesting prospect, I think there is more to explore here, even if the Chapter 4 DLCs do not concern warfare. Some examples of things I'd like to see include naming yourself or your primary heir as the new heir of a foreign claimed title. This could maybe offer a bonus to succession, where the vassals you inherit will not be as bitter towards you for supplanting their traditional liege so heavy-handedly. Or perhaps an option for holy wars to end not in conquest, but in conversion. You can already invalidate holy wars by converting to the aggressor's faith, so a way to enforce this on others, without needing to own entire swathes of land, could be an alternative ending. I'm sure there are many potential outcomes for giving more options and ways to end a war reparations, development transferal, etc., but any interesting new features added here could be cool to see. Artefact quality revision. Among some of my most ancient requested features for this game comes a rework to how artifacts work, and I assure you they will make no absence for Chapter 4. For the uninitiated, I have long held that a 5th tier of artifact should be added to the game, known as Legendary, alongside a submarker for historical artifacts. In Wards and Wardens, we gained access to a new 5th tier of education trait, so I feel a 5th tier of artifact is not the worst thing in the world. The intention is to make a distinct goal to acquire a highly sought after list of treasures to collect in the world that are not randomly generated with varied stats, but fixed rewards for completing fixed great feats. Of course, some items in the world are not worthy of a legendary status, but are historical, and I think this too is valid. As such, it would be nice to have an icon or trait inside the description of the artifacts to clearly reflect that this is a real-life historical artifact, if some of us want to keep track of what is of significance among the mass of spawned trinkets. The end result would offer future potential for creating great quests, such as restoring the Roman Empire to offer a unique artifact reward, distinguished from the plethora of illustrious junk as something you can display proudly to celebrate your victory. Because honestly, who doesn't want to have their victories out on display? Visit Holdings Update. To cap-end my major suggestions, I'd like to talk about one of my favourite additions to Roads to Power, that being Holding Visitation. Being able to go into a holding and have a series of options to play with was such a great idea that I didn't see coming. My hope is that Landless will not become forgotten content and may see future love in the form of updating the Visit Holding decision becoming even better. To offer some examples, let's say a holding has a farm or a cattle ranch. There could be an option to spend a month there as a farmhand. This could give you a little gold, but costs you fame, as no character destined for greatness should be spending their time labouring in the fields. although I guess it could give you a 1% chance to get strong. Alternatively, another use of holdings could be more sinful, with a list of gallows bait worthy endeavours to pursue, such as casual theft on the street to a callous local wanting help to murder his adversary. These new additions may require an expanded UI beyond the adapted event window, maybe even with holdings having a few specific characters relative to their location, such as an innkeeper and a village elder. On the whole, there is a tremendous wealth of opportunity with holding interaction. I'm conscious that Landless was never an intended long-stay mechanic, and more so something you briefly stay in before pursuing more landed goals, but I think to completely overlook the possibilities this system offers would be such a tragedy, so frankly any future content to Landless would be welcome. Alright, with the 5 major changes covered, we can now pick up the pace, talking about 5 minor, but still important, changes. Duchy limit options. It would be nice to have some smaller ways to increase Duchy limit from beyond the base limit of 2. It feels almost every aspect of the game has room for expansion, domain limit, building slots, vassal limit, but the one administrative hurdle nobody can pass is Duchy limit. To be clear, I think keeping it low is good for balancing, but maybe a mid-game technology, some cultural traditions, or even just bumping it up to 3 for empires would be a nice sense of progression to hold more personal land as time progresses. It remains funny to me that we have so many duchy buildings to choose from, but are forever punished for wanting to own more than 2. Holy Sites reworked. As it stands right now, holy sites and special buildings occupy the same holding slot. This can have some unfortunate interaction where your capital may be the holy site of some random heresy or infidel religion, and you're rendered unable to build a special building there or really do anything about the ugly empty slot staring at you. I'm looking at you, York. My request for this is to split holy sites and special buildings so we can have a bit more breathing room on this front. Now, Byzantium has room for its Hippodrome, in contrast to its Hagia Sophia, and York doesn't have to be forced to consider building an Asatru Hall of Worship when firmly under control of the Catholics for the majority of the game. Allowing duchy buildings, special buildings, and now holy buildings is therefore my suggestion, although I have not forgotten the very widespread desire for players to be able to move and customize religious holy sites. I can only assume such a change, though, would be geared towards a religious DLC, so I guess we'll have to wait and see. Cadet limits and removal. I cannot be the first person to be annoyed by getting through a few generations of the game and having half my dynasty explode into 10 different houses, splitting from the head despite having no real reason beyond they can. I think a standard game option, increasing the requirements and lowering the AI's chance to do so, would be a welcome addition, but more so, in the dynasty menu, when clicking on your list of houses, if a house is dead, the dynasty head being allowed to remove the house from the list, much like legends can be removed from your records, would be nice, so I don't need to see the most obscure houses that died before they even got started and frankly should have never have existed to begin with. Remove nicknames. An oldie, but a goodie. Sometimes your character can receive a nickname you hate. The Fat, the Prince of Fashion, the Spawn of Satan, whatever. Since rulers cared greatly about their image, it could be good to have a button to remove your nickname at the cost of prestige. The more negative the nickname, the more expensive the prestige cost to remove it. Since having some nicknames can lock you out of acquiring others, it may be nice to be able to remove some, but alternatively, it could also be nice to have more than one nickname at the same time. For example, imagine a list of nicknames, so you would be both the Fat and the Spawn of Satan, and then you get to choose which one is displayed on your title card. In any sense, a way to change nicknames could be cool to see. Volcanoes. I like volcanoes. Sadly, CK3 doesn't have volcanoes. It does, however, have a Canary Islander religion, which worships volcanoes, with the coolest religious icon in the game. My final, minor suggestion would be for any future update to add in some volcanoes to the world map to improve the visuals, but also open up the possibility to eruption disasters. In Italy, we have Mount Etna and Mount Vesuvius, for example, that could erupt on a 50 to 100 year timescale, destroying development. Or perhaps to the northwest we have Iceland, proving not to be the most isolated Viking utopia it wants to be if it's having to deal with volcanoes. It's not necessarily a wide sweeping update that covers the entire map, but I think that works because having a few major sites with these very strong visual elements would really help diversify and differentiate playing in certain areas versus playing in certain different areas. The uniqueness could work really well thanks to volcanoes. Okay, that covers my 5 minor suggestions. Smaller things that would be nice to see. So now let's go over 5 petty suggestions, so minute that they may go overlooked by some, but not by me. Travel hotkeys. When arranging a detour on travel, you have to manually click the plus to add a new destination, then click the barony you want to go to. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This is such a tedium for a journey from one side of Europe to the Holy Land. If you're planning to visit landmarks along the way for Wanderer XP, you better prepare for a tired index finger. I think a nice fix would be a button, hotkey or method to quickly add detours. For example, if you were to control click, a new detour could be added instantly to the bottom of the travel queue, and then for the return journey you could use shift click and add a detour to the bottom of the return journey. Maybe there's a better system to do this, I'm not sure, but any quality of life to improve the way that you navigate travel would be appreciated. If such a system is not implemented though, I do at least hope a change is made to stop the list of detours defaulting to the top every time you add a detour, meaning you have to scroll to the bottom again to click the plus to add a detour, only to scroll back down again. That is easily the most not user-friendly system in the travel system. Spectacles bug fix. Have you ever had a character get a high learning skill? If so, you may be familiar with the horrible disease often afflicting such victims, where a pair of fleshy glasses spawn on their face, welded into the skin, and forever irremovable. This is a famous bug, which has somehow survived many patches, and I just wanted to use this space to hope that maybe this year we will see the ability to remove the cursed spectacles once and for all. They even overlap with face items, which sometimes would be cool if it were optional, but alas, no such luck. Dynasty name and coat of arms saving. Short and sweet. I think most aspects of the game now allow you to save presets. Character traits, character names and appearances in one place, game rules and all of the settings in another. Frustratingly, however, saving a character does not save the dynasty name or their coat of arms. In fact, there is no way that I know of to save coat of arms in-game, and you have to keep a document with the script saved around if you want to reuse a complicated design. This also applies if you're trying to do so in-game with customizing titles such as the barony flag or a kingdom flag. This does feel like the missing link for what is almost a complete system, so allowing dynasty names and coat of arms to be a savable and loadable system in-game would be appreciated. A dual kill list. When your character has killed someone, a log is created, listing every person you ever killed and how. I think this is a nice detail to record your character's story. What would then be a nice addition is a new tab to show every duel you've ever won, showcasing how many times you beat different types of opponent and if it was even to the death. My reason is that sometimes being a king, you can just sometimes find yourself needing to exert lethal justice on far too many people, and as such, you lose track of who you valiantly fought in an honour duel because you killed 100 peasants in a revolt. I think it would be a nice addition to the storytelling of the game to have a log of all of the duels you've had, whether they were in tournaments, whether they were honour duels, whether they were to the death, and some nice stats to go along with it. Remove commission RNG. So finally, to this day, I have no idea why commissioning an artifact requires a percentage chance of getting a dagger or a sword, or even worse, a three-way split on an axe, a hammer, or a mace. It is already a struggle getting even a slightly okay artifact using this decision, but to add in this strange dice roll of outcome really doesn't make sense to me when you are the one commissioning the weapon. Maybe one day there could be some kind of minor blacksmithing update where you build up weapons and improve them, and there's very cool fixed stats that you can work with, but if nothing else, removing this strange RNG from commissioning an artifact would be one less frustration. And so, that wraps up my 15 suggestions for Chapter 4. This year I decided not to go too hard on too many crazy things. I feel my previous video talking about event spam kind of touched on one of the major issues of the game, so this was just about talking about some nice things that would be cool to see throughout the year. I've noticed that the devs have been especially attentive this year, so maybe there's some hope for some of your suggestions being added, so make sure to make them known, whether that's in the forums, in the comments of YouTube videos like this one, or wherever, because they do seem to be listening. Alright, with that being said, feel free to tell me what you think of my suggestions. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is it something you've been thinking about? I have no idea. Regardless, if you like this video, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, and I guess I'll see you all next time. Bye bye bye. Bye 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 bye.